Hello fellow fish keepers. Welcome to FishEZ, the first premier tour of the facility inside. It's only a 100 square foot room, but it's packed with information and items that you might find interesting. If you see something of interest, or if you just merely have a question, be sure to put it in the comments below. If you do, I will answer them or cover them completely in a future video. So this is one you don't want to miss. Sit back and enjoy it to the end.
And let's get started. Let's walk inside the room and take a look at what you can fit in a 100 square foot space. Well, first thing you see, I guess, are tanks. Of course, in such a small space, it's easy to fill it out completely. The back rack is 5 foot and it's full of tanks, and that's the first thing you see. But right here to the right is a 30-gallon tall, and it's beautifully positioned in just like an island fashion. I have some adult male breeder Odessa barbs. I even use the back of the tank for notes to myself. You may have noticed that. But there's always something to do, plenty to do to keep track of. But this tank also serves as a little grow out. Sometimes I put grow out young fry or a batch of fry in here to grow out before I sell them. The various species I mix. Sometimes there's different ones in here. I see a few African banded barbs. Down below is a 20-gallon long. It's got 2 filters, an over the back and a sponge filter at the moment. Sometimes when there's a little more fish than I should have, which happens when there's a lot, I'll make sure there's some over the back extra filtration. But in this case, it looks like it's just a leftover from previous. Right now there's not that many fish in here. Some German blue rams growing out, just starting to get their color at this stage. And you'll see some mono shrimp, my cleanup crew. Those are found throughout various different tanks. They eat whatever's left over. They seem to also thrive on the algae, so they're a welcome part of it. Now, you might see a few odds and ends species. Oh, here's a L134 Pleco, a leopard frog grow out. So I have about 7 of them in here, and I don't even see them much. They're under the log, they're around the bout, but they're thriving and they look beautiful. They're very cute as juvies. So that's that first tank. You do see at first when you come in this sink. It's a utility sink that is the most practical piece of apparatus and device that you'll have inside your fish room, and it's so necessary. It holds here a complete baby brine shrimp hatchery. I'll be getting into that in a future video, discussing in detail how to make these, why I make these, why I do these, and why I work them the way I do. And there's quite a bit involved. But before we get too far into the room, we just walked by 2 small, very shallow tanks. Well, I shouldn't say shallow. Their depth is shallow. They're very narrow and quite tall. They're 7.5 gallons by calculation. They were originally designed to be some sump pumps and sump tanks, but turns out that they've made some nice tanks for this entryway. These 2 pairs of German blue rams are breeding for me quite extensively, and they tend to be divided by this over the back filter. There's a flow going right down the center, and the plastic plants divided off as a divider. Now they do go from side to side and chase each other, but each one has set up their own territory. One on one side, 1 pair on the other side. And that's really all it takes is to keep them separated. They know the boundaries, and they tend to set up shop without bothering one another. But having a nice dense centerpiece like that, I don't need to put a piece of glass or plastic or netting to separate them. They know which sides they should go on or should not be. Only when I throw food in there does everybody seem to just go crazy and go after the food. They don't seem to even notice the boundary, but then they quickly go back. Above that tank is an equal tank to it. It's another 7.5 gallon. It's a very shallow in depth tank, but I've been kind of playing around with some live plants, and I've always had difficulty raising live plants, but suddenly, just recently, the columba here is just taking off, and it's quite amazing how fast it grows. There's a few my female cardinals, and here's an Apistogramma borellii opal, who is just kind of the centerpiece of the tank. For those who are into display tanks, this is the case. Now the female is in this cave, so I'm hoping to get a nice batch of fry out of that pair. So we'll see. On the front of it, it's eye level, so it's a perfect place to put my breeder boxes. You'll see in this particular tank, this is batch number 1155. It's a featured batch in an upcoming video, and you'll want to pay attention. Just not even quite free swimming yet. These are German blue rams, and we're going to follow them through from egg to how I raise them and how I get them going, and that's very soon. But you can see having them right here in front of my face at eye level, I can clean the bottom of the breeder boxes and take care of them quite well. There is a small tank on top, but right above on the shelf over my sink is you would say a betta tank. It was a long, I think it's about a 2.5 gallon, something like that. And I had a pair of rams in here, and they spawned. I just left them, decided to see if they would raise the babies, and they did. So the fry in here are all raised by their dad until they got to the point where dad had to be moved on, and so I took him out. But I have some footage of the fry with the dad right here in this tank, and I watched them grow. So above is my quick access to Paramecium. I have a number of live foods that I use, or in this case looks like some Daphnia to the left. And of course the salt is used here for the baby brine shrimp. So the shelf in the corner is basically storage for the day-to-day necessities. Odds and ends and things I quickly access are placed in this glass dish. So these are things I use every day or constantly, and then things I don't use so often get put closer to the back. I don't need them, and from time to time I might get them. So looking again back at the 5-footer, you got a 10-gallon on the left, a 15-gallon in the middle, and a 40-gallon on the right, acrylic. And this all sits over a 90-gallon. So that's what's over here. It's quite popular with Odessa barbs. Let's take a quick look at what we have down in the 90-gallon. Those big fish are teardrop barbs. One of my favorite types of fish. They are tremendous. I used to raise a lot of filamentosa, Dawkinsia filamentosa, or black spot barbs. These are Rohani, or teardrop barbs. They're closely related, same genus. And intermixed, there are the male Odessas that will be sold very soon. Thrown in are some cichlids. I don't have a lot of cichlids in the fish room, but you'll notice these are Thoreictus ariums. I got these from a local fish store and raised them up, and you'll notice that there's quite a bit of color coming in on them. Now, of course, I have some boxes stored for when I give away ship fish or whatever, but these trays are very handy. And you'll notice that the first tray basically has odds and ends for breeding projects or any little project I have in the room. So this is certain kinds of little pieces of filter and so forth. The center pullout is food. These are all my this is my arsenal of foods used for feeding the breeders. And the last little pullout is odds and ends for electrical work, or mostly plumbing. So plumbing is important in this fish room because even in the corner you'll see lots of extra 1/2 inch, 3/4 inch, a couple of larger ones. Those are PVC for quick access. Now, actually, the 2 canisters serve the 90-gallon here. And we're going to get into lots of the details of little things like that in the future. So don't forget, you will want to be subscribed and to get kind of updates. These are Odessa barbs. Now, the Odessa barbs, this is a batch that was raised for one. There's going to be an upcoming video on how to breed these. They're tremendous to watch in large numbers. They tend to school. They're very much interested in schooling all the time, and they stick together, and they won't start turning colors until they're about 8 months. So let's do a water change on them. Here's how I do it. Very simple. I just turn a knob. Now that's a siphon knob. Most of my tanks have that kind of a kind of, not an overflow, but a kind of a drain. You'll notice the marks on the tank are right there on the corner. We're watching the water drop, and I drop it the same amount. And when there's this many fish in there, I'll do this every day. So I'll just drop it good 5 gallons, maybe 5-6 gallons tops. Then I stop it. And over on the right, these are the refill. So then I just simply turn the knob, and tap water will flow right back into the tank. So that is how I change the water on a tank like this. I don't use any water conditioner. I just use straight tap water, but I just do a little bit at a time. So the big tanks are done that way. The bigger fish don't seem to mind. They don't get enough chlorine. My water has mostly just chlorine, no chloramines, which is good. pH of about 7.8 to 7.4 to 7.8. And the tank here is sitting under an electrical panel, but it's easily moved if need be. These are more Odessa barbs in a 20-gallon tall. And it's kept pretty clear. I have an extra filtration on this one right now. Sometimes I move it in and out. There's a few rams that are ready for sale, and those are located in this tank for easy grab. So I can come over to this tank, and these are all ready to sale. I just open the lid, fish them out, and it's a quick snatch. Of course, I have long-finned bushy nose and citrus type. They are found throughout the tanks because I've had quite a success. Let's look at the rest of the racks. Turning around, you see on the left a series of racks, and then on the right a series of racks, and it's quite compact. There's not much room to swing around here, but it's really a one-person room. But it's my room, and I enjoy spending time there. Now, thanks to Mark's Aquatics, he always got me going on a workbench. This is my workbench. Basically, you'll notice these 4 or 5 gallons are where I do most of my breeding. It's the bulwark, or shall we say the workhorse of the fish room. So I'll breed in these tanks, and then of course as the fish continue to grow, I move them out. Now above that is a 25-gallon in the back there, and that's what I want to point out. See the numbers on the glass? Very important. We'll talk about that in just a second. But this tank is refilled from a tap with a turn of a knob, and it refills, and then water will actually drain out of this tank. It's much higher than any of the other tanks, and so I use gravity feed. Or I can actually use a pump inside that tank to pump the water out the side. You'll see the PVC going out the corner there, and that's how I do a water change. Very simple to restore the water in tanks when they don't have a tap feed. So water is put into this 25-gallon. It is highly aerated. And if I put some prime conditioner in it, I can. There's a 300-watt thermometer heater inside there, and in 1 hour's time after putting it in, it can be ready for a water change, more tanks. So I can do 22 gallons at a time. So here's a batch of Odessas. They were bred here. No, these are, I'm sorry, my mistake. Looking at, there were Odessas in here, but these are actually German blue rams. So they were put in there from the breeder boxes, and I use them after the breeder box. They go into this 5-gallon to grow out a bit. These are now ready to be moved out, as you can see. But the water changes are easy because each of these tanks can be water changed by drip method. Here's another third one full of German blue rams. So each one of these tanks can be easily changed out on the water. So I merely use airline tubing to drain the water out from above into these tanks. The fourth tank here on the workbench is got my super red long-finned Plecos and a few other ancestris in there, and some albinos, a couple in there. So this one is an ancestris. So to give it extra flow, and not only does it have a filter on the back, I stick this small aqua clear filter on the front to give it plenty of flow and just to work as a flow. Now this contraption is my overflow. So as water goes into the tank, it drains out through this PVC that's sitting in the front. So I have another video on this, how to make these overflows, and I really advise, I'll put the link in the comments below to that particular one. The first two tanks have the overflow on the back. See the little arch tubing, and then you'll see it's on the back side of the first two, and then it's on the front side of these two. And I think only reason because I had to put it on the front is because I didn't leave enough space when I set up the racks to get enough pipe on the back side, so it was a little congested. So now I'm stuck with these overflows on the front, which isn't a bad thing. I have control over it and so forth. Now, getting water in is not a problem. I use this splitter. Water is coming out of the tank above. I just turn a knob and you can see the flow begin. And now it will begin to just fill up this tank, but it will overflow at the same rate. So I don't really have to worry about it overflowing onto the floor. Water just continuously drips in, and I can change maybe the whole 5 gallons. I can do 2 gallons. How do I know? Well, I just look at the marks and I can see the level. Right now it's at 0, meaning 0 have gone out and it's got 22 capacity left in it, so that's where it's at. But as the water drops, I can an hour later come in and see that it's already flushed 4 gallons and I have 18 left. So that's how it works. And I can just start 1, 2, 3. I just take the next one, and now I'm flowing in 2 of the tanks. In fact, I'm just going to start all 3 and right now kind of flow all 3 tanks, let them all filter, or I should say flush out with a water change. That is not going to overflow onto the floor. They all have overflows on the tank. Below this is a 20 gallon long. These are my L134 Leopard frog Plecos. I'm going to get in here one day and do some readjusting. They have spawned. You saw some of the fry a minute ago. So I've got a number of caves. It seems as though they like them all. They like all the caves, though I think some of the more preferred sizes, I think it's the one that's a little on the smaller side. Back to that center tank, the leopard frog fry juvies. There is one right there. Good shot. Gives you a chance to see what they look like when they're a little older. These were first put in breeder boxes and hung on the side of the breeder or tank where they were spawned, and they were there for a few weeks, several weeks, maybe even a month or 2 before they were put here to grow out longer. So that's the center tank. We already looked on the other side, on the back side of those tanks, but let's go on. Let's go on to the next 4-foot section. 3 10 gallons are at the eye level, and you can put 4 5 gallons, or you can put 3 10 gallons. In this case, here's my 10 gallons. I got a batch of checkered barbs in this one, and there's males and females, some of them. I didn't clean out the algae on these, just to show that I go through and clean a section each week of a different section. So from time to time you'll see some of these tanks will have some algae in it. These are tiger barbs, all bred from green moss tiger barbs, or green tiger barbs as most people know them. And they looking fun, you know, they're just one of those fish everybody loves. These are golden dwarf barbs. I've tried an experiment here to try to see if I could get them to breed in a tank by themselves. I've only been able to breed or raise 2 of the youngsters. They're very slow growing. I've not been able to be very successful at breeding these at any numbers, and so I'm not sure where I'm going to be able to go with these, but I was able to raise 2 of them. In fact, we'll take a look in a minute to see if we can see them in one of the tanks above. So those are my 3 10-gallon tanks. We can just go up and see above. You notice how each one of these has air going to it, but underneath is a valve for changing the water. So there's the drain. It's siphon valve type of drain, so I can just turn the knob and drop the water level to that little mark I have there. So 1/3 of the water gets changed regularly. Above them is the 4 5-gallons, so a little different arrangement. And up here there's obviously Psedumugil rainbow fish. On the left there is some luminatus, then there's forcatus, gertrudae in this 3rd one, and the last one over looks like more forcatus. So there's interesting to see the different Psedumugil blue-eyed rainbows. I have another video on that to learn more, so upcoming, so stay tuned. On this side there's also 3 10-gallons at the same eye level, and we'll just start at the far end. This is some African banded barbs I raised along with hexazona, Desmupuntius hexazona. Some people know them as pentazona because they have pretty much bred out the 6th bar, but some of these youngsters, you'll notice if you look, I'll probably have to do a video on it to show you. Some of them do come with 6 bars, and the 6 bar is at the tail, near the base of the tail. In this tank, I've got some tiger barb projects. These are what I frankly term blueberry. I call them blueberry tiger barbs because of their color. They're pretty blue, but they are supposedly, probably more likely a leucistic form, and probably known more as green platinums, though these are not as beautiful as the green platinums I have seen in some places with red fins. These have more darker, very little. Oh, and another tank of German blues. So everywhere you look there's German blues, and they're doing quite well with raising several batches throughout the fish room. But I do put some moss in there. I find it very practical. In the 20-gallon below, there's a few oddball fish being raised. There's some female hexazonas, a few checkered barbs, but in the back, see, you'll notice I have a small young colony of 10 Synodontis lucipinnis. Now, the lucipinnis, I got them very small, and I've just been raising them up. I've had these probably no less than 2 years, actually probably 2.5 years now, and they're slow growing, but they're getting to the point where I have seen breeding behavior, and I see them getting very frisky, and they're at the age where I could start looking for fry, but I just haven't done that yet. So in an upcoming video, I'm sure as I have more success with those, there might be something to look at. Well, let's go just to the bottom. It's a low tank. I keep my cories on the lower level. These are orange laser cories. I have a few, the Venezuelan orange. There's a few youngsters in there. For a time I had them together, but you'll notice that younger one, a smaller one of the laser, is right in the foreground. That's one I raised, and the rest are the adults. They were breeding quite frequently for a little while, then they stopped, so I just haven't paid much attention. I like to put some overhead ditherfish. These are it's nice grow out space for the blue-eyed rainbows as they continue to raise fry. It's kind of nice because they inhabit the upper portion. They're very friendly. They don't bother the cories, and that's kind of a nice mix between the two. On the left-hand side, a 15-gallon holding the Venezuelan orange breeders. I've got some additional work to do in this tank, but it's just always little projects lined up. I've got to get to one of these days, and I will. This little last 5-gallon, you'll notice, for example, this is where the hatching occurs for the mops. that you saw up above, and I just put them in here and then fish out the small fry as they come. And so this is a hatchery of sorts. There's a heater in there, and it's kept warmer than the Corys. The Corys don't seem to worry about that. 20-gallon long above him is got more Odessa barbs at a younger age. Each one of my batches of Odessa barbs were bred under different parameters. I'm doing experiments and observations as far as sex ratio on these, because I have had cases where I've raised close to 1,000 fish and they were all one sex, and I got no females. So I'm not sure what the parameters were. So that's why this year is sort of more of an experiment to see how I can replicate that, which I did the year before in 2020, I should say. I was raising all males. This is 2021 now, so that's gives you an idea of what's going on. The last section of the fish room is this upper. It's a little tight to the ceiling, so I only have 4-gallon tanks. They're not quite 5.5 gallon. They're a little smaller than that. I have a little guppy colony on the left. I have a number of them. Oh, and this is where there is a couple of those golden dwarf barbs. This Pethia helius. And they're in there. I'm not sure if you can see them. They kind of got mixed in with the guppies, but I only had a few guppies to start with. Actually, I sold off the colony. I didn't want them anymore, but somehow after I sold them off, there were a couple babies in the back that I didn't notice. They were mixed in with the moss, and then just left the tank as it is, and suddenly it spewed into a brand new colony all over again. So I don't see those dwarf barbs, but they're in there. They were in there. They're probably in the back, and they were doing quite well. They were actually very timid, and once I put the guppies in there, they became a lot less timid. So the ditherfish really does a good number for certain species, especially golden dwarf barbs. Now, this tank is a recent breeding project, so you'll notice I have taken out the parents, but if you look real close, you'll see the moinia, or very small daphnia, living in here, because I usually add that as soon as I take out the parents, so that they can start multiplying, and it provides a nice food for the fry. I haven't seen any fry yet, but it takes patience. These are going to be green platinum tiger barbs. We'll see what happens with those. It takes 3 or 4 days before you start to see them traveling up and down the sides of the glass. They kind of look like they're walking. They're so different. Every species, even all the barbs, are different. Here is another Apistogramma borellii opal. And there's a couple of tinwinny males I have just in this tank. This one is not much going on here. There's so many tanks for me to worry about that I can every week I'm kind of playing with a different group. Here's a pair of the Apistogramma borellii, and so you see the male on the left and the female on the right, which is much smaller and just yellow. That's the difference between these two. So this is the male. He's looking good. He's a nice looking male, though they're in the tank of their own. I'm just waiting for some breeding activity. I have some plants I put in these small pots. I like to do that because that way I can just pick out the plant and move it to another tank. If I really want to get rid of some algae on the plants, I often put them in a tank with lots of amano shrimp, and it makes a big difference. So we've seen pretty much, looking at this tank, I would say it's the last one on the list, right? Yeah, looking around the fish room, I'm standing on a stool looking down, and this is what it's like. I'll talk more in the future about why I have a tank of green algae, or not green algae, but green water, which is an algae growing in the water, and you can see from above what's going on all over the fish room from up here. So thank you very much. for taking the time to just do a walkthrough and seeing all the tanks and what's going on. And it's always changing, ever evolving into something more interesting or something different. And but I do have techniques. I'm an engineer by trade, so I like to design different little tips and tricks. So you'll see all kinds of little ways of changing them up. So say goodbye to Mr. Ram, and we'll end it here and pick it up again real soon.
Thank you so much for staying to the end. I hope you enjoyed your tour of FishEZ. Of course, if you had a question, be sure to put it down below. I will answer it and even possibly feature it in a future video. But be sure you're subscribed. That way you'll know when the next video comes out. See you next time.